Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. Last episode, Marcus faced Tony for the first time since his release, confronting years of pain and betrayal. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it planted a seed of something Marcus hadn't thought possible: hope. Today, we're picking up where we left off to explore how Marcus's journey toward forgiveness begins to intertwine with Tony's efforts for redemption. It's a story about growth, struggle, and the fragile threads that can rebuild broken trust. The days following Marcus's prison visit were restless. Despite feeling lighter after seeing Tony, his emotions churned like a storm. Questions he buried began surfacing. Could Tony truly change? And if so, what did that mean for their relationship? Marcus threw himself into the second gear initiative to quiet his thoughts, but the memories of their meeting lingered. Tony, on the other hand, took Marcus's visit as a glimmer of hope. He spent years trying to become someone his brother could be proud of, even if they never reconciled. After the visit, he doubled down on his efforts inside the prison. Tony organized peer mentoring sessions, helping younger inmates navigate life behind bars and avoid falling into the traps that had ensnared him. These efforts didn't erase his past, but they gave his present some meaning. Back in the free world, Marcus's second gear initiative was gaining traction. The program had expanded to include vocational training workshops, job placement services, and even partnerships with local businesses. Marcus had become a public figure, often invited to speak at community events and conferences. His story resonated with people, and his work was making a tangible difference. One evening, Marcus was invited to a panel discussion on criminal justice reform. As he sat under the bright stage lights recounting his journey, he felt a mix of pride and vulnerability. A member of the audience asked a question that caught him off guard: "Have you forgiven the person who put you in prison?" The room fell silent. Marcus hesitated, his thoughts racing. "Forgiveness is complicated," he finally said. "It's not something you just decide to do one day and move on. It's a process. I'm still figuring it out, but I've realized that holding on to anger only hurts me, so I'm working on it." His answer was honest, but it left him uneasy. After the panel, he found himself replaying the question in his mind. Was he really working on forgiveness, or was he just avoiding it? That night, he sat down and wrote a letter to Tony. It was short and guarded, but it was a start. Tony received the letter a week later. It wasn't what he'd hoped, for there were no declarations of forgiveness, no signs of reconciliation. But it was more than he'd expected. Marcus had written, "Tony, I'm still angry. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, but I can see that you're trying. Maybe that's enough for now." For Tony, those words were a lifeline. They weren't absolution, but they were a step toward redemption. He replied immediately, thanking Marcus and promising to keep working on himself. The exchange of letters became a new chapter in their relationship, one of cautious rebuilding. Meanwhile, Marcus faced challenges of his own. The rapid growth of the second gear initiative brought its share of stress. Funding was always a concern, and the pressure to deliver results weighed heavily on him. But the program's success stories kept him going. He saw men and women who had been written off by society find purpose and stability, and it reminded him why he started the initiative in the first place. One of those success stories was a young man named Jalen. Fresh out of prison and struggling to find his footing, Jalen joined the second gear initiative with little hope. Marcus took him under his wing, teaching him not just about mechanics, but about resilience and determination. Over time, Jalen transformed. He became one of the program's brightest stars, eventually landing a job at a top auto shop. Seeing Jalen's progress inspired Marcus, reinforcing his belief in second chances. As Marcus continued to pour himself into the initiative, he couldn't ignore the parallels between Jalen's story and Tony's. Both had made mistakes, but both were trying to change. The difference was that Marcus had chosen to help Jalen, while he kept Tony at arm's length. The realization gnawed at him, pushing him to confront his own biases. Months passed, and the letters between Marcus and Tony became more frequent. They talked about their childhood, their mother, and the path their lives had taken. Marcus still struggled with trust, but he couldn't deny that Tony seemed genuine. The walls between them were beginning to crack, but they hadn't crumbled yet. Then came a turning point. Tony's parole hearing was scheduled, and he asked Marcus for a letter of support. It was a request that forced Marcus to confront everything he'd been grappling with. Could he vouch for Tony? Did he believe his brother deserved another chance? Marcus wrestled with the decision for days. He consulted his mother, who urged him to follow his heart. He spoke to Mr. Harris, who reminded him that everyone deserves the opportunity to prove they've changed. In the end, Marcus decided to write the letter. It wasn't a glowing endorsement, but it was honest. He wrote about the steps Tony had taken to better himself and the efforts he'd made to mend their relationship. When the day of the parole hearing arrived, Marcus found himself pacing his apartment, unable to focus. Hours later, he got the call Tony's parole had been granted. The news left Marcus with mixed emotions, relief, apprehension, and a lingering sense of uncertainty. What would life look like with Tony back in the world? Check this out, y'all. The U.S. Department of Justice reports that up to 50% of gang members eventually leave gangs, but many cite difficulty due to fear of retaliation or lack of support. As we close this episode of Doing Time with Joe, let's reflect on the power of redemption. It's not an easy path, and it's never guaranteed. But when we open ourselves to the possibility of change in ourselves and others, we create room for something extraordinary to happen. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.